In a small, forgotten village, hidden deep within the heart of the ancient lands of Judea, there existed a legend, one that had been passed down through generations. Whispered around campfires and within the stone walls of crumbling churches, the story spoke of a time when the teachings of Jesus Christ had not been entirely lost to the annals of history, but rather had been suppressed, hidden from the world by forces unknown. These teachings, said the legend, held the keys to a world far beyond the material, a path toward inner peace and divine connection that had been veiled from the masses. It was in this village that a young woman named Miriam found herself at a crossroads. Miriam had heard the whispers, the rumors of lost teachings, and the mystical power they might hold. Some claimed that these were the words of Jesus not spoken in the Gospels. Teachings that had been hidden for centuries, buried beneath the weight of time and tradition, driven by a deep longing for answers to questions that had haunted her soul. Miriam set out on a journey to uncover the truth behind these lost teachings. Her quest would lead her down paths fraught with danger and intrigue, into the very heart of a conspiracy that stretched back to the days of early Christianity. Along the way, she would meet others, seekers of truth, those who had long since given up on the established doctrines of religion and were searching for something deeper, something that resonated with the truth within them. Miriam's journey would take her to the ancient ruins of places once thought holy, where the earth whispered secrets of times long past. It was here, in the shadow of an abandoned temple, that she would uncover a manuscript unlike any other. The pages, old and fragile, spoke of lost words, teachings that had been carefully hidden away by a secret order determined to keep him from the world. These teachings, according to the manuscript, held the answers to life's greatest mysteries, and could lead to an understanding of Christ's true message, a message that had been buried by those in power, fearful of what it might reveal. But as Miriam began to decipher the ancient text, she realized the words were not merely about faith. They spoke of transformation, of a new understanding of the self and the divine. And with each word she read, she began to see that these teachings were not just relevant to the ancient world, they were meant for the modern world too. Miriam held the fragile manuscript in her hands, the edges of the parchment crinkling slightly as she turned each page with care. The faint scent of ancient ink and dust filled the air, carrying the weight of centuries. She had traveled far, through barren deserts and over mountain ranges, until she finally found herself in this forgotten corner of the world, a place where the air seemed to hold memories, where even the stones whispered of past lives. The manuscript, written in an old dialect of Aramaic, had been entrusted to her by an elder in the village who claimed to have been its keeper for many years. His face was lined with age, but his eyes sparkled with a knowing wisdom, as though he understood the significance of this moment far more than Miriam could fathom. He had warned her, with a grave tone, that the journey she was about to embark on would change her forever. There are forces, the elder had said, that do not wish for this knowledge to be known. You must be cautious, Miriam. Some truths are better left buried. But Miriam had made up her mind. She had spent her life searching for answers, for something deeper than the surface teachings of her faith. Something in her soul knew that these ancient words held the key to something profound, something that could change not only her life but the world around her. As she sat alone in the dim light of her small tent, Miriam began to read aloud, the ancient words flowing from her lips as if they were speaking directly to her. The text was a blend of wisdom, metaphysical insight, and spiritual guidance, each word filled with layers of meaning that seemed to reach beyond the limits of human understanding. She had been studying the scriptures all her life, but these words, these lost teachings, were unlike anything she had encountered before. The first passage spoke of the nature of God, not as an external force but as an inner presence within every living being. God is not separate from you. The words read, He is within you, in your very breath, in the beating of your heart. To seek Him outside of yourself is to miss the truth. You are the temple, you are the vessel. Miriam paused, letting the words sink in. She had always been taught to look beyond herself, to seek God in the heavens or in the teachings of religious leaders. But this teaching was different. It suggested that God was not some distant entity to be worshipped from afar, but rather, a living presence that resided within her, within everyone. Her thoughts were interrupted as the manuscript revealed more words, this time about the power of love. Love is the force that binds the universe together, it said. it is not a fleeting emotion but a divine energy that flows through all things. To love is to connect with the divine essence that is within every soul. And through love, you shall know peace, for love conquers all. These words struck Miriam deeply. She had often heard the word love used in religious contexts, but never had she encountered such a powerful and profound description of it. This love was not a passive feeling but an active, transformative force, one that could heal wounds, transcend time and space, and unite all living beings in a shared experience of divinity. But as Miriam read further, the tone of the manuscript began to shift. The words spoke of a secret, an ancient knowledge that had been hidden away by those in power. Those who feared the true nature of Christ's message, the true teachings of Jesus. The text revealed, were not meant to create divisions, to build churches, or to form empires. They were meant to awaken the divine spark within every individual, to guide them towards spiritual enlightenment and unity. The words continued, speaking of a dark chapter in history, a time when those who sought to control the masses took the teachings of Christ and twisted them for their own purposes. They stripped away the deeper spiritual truths and replaced them with doctrines of fear, guilt, and separation. They taught the people to worship an external God and to look for salvation in distant places, rather than within themselves. Miriam's heart raced as she read. The very essence of what she had been taught her whole life was being called into question. If the true teachings of Christ were meant to lead her to a deeper understanding of herself and her connection to God, then what had she been following all these years? Had she been misled by the very institutions that claimed to represent the truth? The manuscript hinted at a secret society, an order of enlightened individuals who had preserved these teachings through the centuries, protecting them from those who would use them for power and control. The order's mission was clear, to safeguard the knowledge until the world was ready to receive it again. But that time had not yet come. Miriam had been chosen, whether by fate or by design, to be the one to uncover this truth and bring it to light. As the evening wore on, Miriam continued to read, her mind racing with the implications of what she was discovering. The teachings spoke of an inner awakening, a process of self-realization that could lead to a profound transformation of the individual and the world. It was not a religion, but a way of life, a path toward enlightenment that transcended the boundaries of dogma and ritual. The manuscript described a series of practices, meditations, contemplations, and rituals that could help one connect with the divine essence within. These practices, according to the text, were not just spiritual exercises but transformative tools that could lead to a deeper understanding of the universe and one's place within it. As Miriam sat there, absorbing the teachings, she began to feel a shift within herself. It was subtle at first, but she could sense a stirring deep within her soul, a feeling of connection to something greater than herself. The weight of the manuscript in her hands seemed to grow heavier, as though it were pressing her to take action, to share what she had learned with the world. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be those who would try to stop her, who would attempt to discredit the teachings and silence her voice. But Miriam felt a deep sense of purpose rising within her. She could no longer turn away from this truth. The world needed to hear what she had uncovered, and she was willing to risk everything to ensure that it would be shared. The night grew late, and Miriam finally closed the manuscript, her heart pounding with the realization of the path she had set upon. There was no turning back now. The teachings had found their way to her, and she knew that it was her duty to pass them on. But as she drifted into sleep, the words of the manuscript echoed in her mind. She had only begun to scratch the surface. There was much more to learn, much more to uncover. The journey was just beginning. The days that followed were marked by a growing sense of urgency. Miriam could feel the weight of the knowledge she had uncovered pressing down on her, pushing her to do more, to understand more. The manuscript lay open before her each night, and as she read, she found herself drawn deeper into a world that seemed both alien and familiar. The teachings were not just about faith or belief, they were about transformation. They spoke of the evolution of the soul, the awakening of a divine consciousness that existed within every human being, waiting to be realized. As the days passed, Miriam's connection to these teachings grew stronger. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her perceptions of the world shifted. The simple things she once overlooked, such as the breeze that moved through the trees or the way the sunlight fell on the earth, seemed to speak to her in a language she could now understand. It was as though her senses had been heightened. Her awareness expanded to encompass more than the physical world around her. The teachings emphasized the power of inner stillness, the ability to quiet the mind and listen to the voice of the divine within. In the silence, the manuscript read, "You will find the answers that have eluded you. The voice of God speaks not in words, but in the spaces between thoughts, in the stillness of your heart. To hear it, you must first learn to be still." Miriam took this lesson to heart. She began spending long hours in meditation, sitting in the quiet of her tent, allowing her mind to become still. It was not easy at first. Her thoughts would race, and doubts would creep in. But gradually, she began to experience moments of peace, brief, fleeting moments when her mind was silent, and she could feel the presence of something greater than herself. It was as if the divine spark within her was awakening, responding to the call of the teachings. One evening, as she sat in deep meditation, she experienced something profound. The world around her seemed to fade away, and for the first time, she felt a true sense of unity with all that was. It was as if the boundaries between herself and the universe had dissolved. She felt the heartbeat of the earth beneath her, the breath of the wind in the air, and the pulse of life in every living thing. In that moment, Miriam understood the truth of the teachings she had uncovered, that all life was interconnected, that the divine was not separate from her but was part of her, and part of everything around her. The manuscript spoke of the need for this realization, for the awakening of the inner self, to bring about a new way of living, a way that transcended the boundaries of religion, culture, and politics. When you see the divine in all things, when you realize that you are one with the world, you will no longer seek power, control, or dominance. It said, you will seek only peace, harmony, and love, and in this state, the world will change. Miriam knew that this truth was radical, even revolutionary. It challenged everything that she had been taught, everything that society had ingrained in her. She had been raised in a world that valued power, wealth, and status. People fought for control, for dominance over one another, and yet the teachings she now held in her hands spoke of a completely different way, a way of humility, of surrender, of love. As Miriam continued to read, the manuscript began to reveal even more startling insights. The next section spoke of the journey of Christ, not just as a man, but as a symbol of the path that every soul must walk. Jesus, the text explained, was not the only one to walk this path. He was the way shower, the one who illuminated the path for others. But this path is open to all. His teachings were not meant to create a religion or a following, they were meant to awaken the Christ within every person. Miriam felt a deep stirring within her. The idea that the Christ within was not a concept reserved for the few, but available to everyone, was revolutionary. This was not about following an external figure or worshipping a distant deity. It was about realizing the divine potential within each individual. The manuscript spoke of the need to embody the Christ consciousness, to live with compassion, wisdom, and love, and to transcend the ego in favor of the higher self. The realization that she was not simply a passive observer of the world, but an active participant in its transformation was both liberating and overwhelming. Miriam felt a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a seeker of truth, she was a bearer of that truth, chosen to share it with the world. But the burden of this knowledge was not light. Miriam knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. There would be those who would not understand, who would dismiss the teachings as heresy, who would attempt to silence her. It was then that Miriam realized that her journey had just begun. The manuscript had revealed only the beginning of the truth. There was more to discover, more to understand, and more to embody. She knew that the teachings would take root in her, but they would also require action, a call to serve, to bring this wisdom into the world in a way that would heal, not divide. One night, as Miriam sat by the fire, reflecting on the teachings, she was visited by an old traveler, a man with piercing eyes and a weathered face, who seemed to carry the weight of many lifetimes. His presence was both comforting and unsettling, and Miriam immediately sensed that he was not just an ordinary man. He spoke in a calm, measured tone. "You have uncovered the lost teachings, Miriam, but now you must ask yourself, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you hide it away, or will you share it with those who are ready to hear it?" Miriam felt a surge of emotion at his words. She had been struggling with the weight of the knowledge she carried. wondering if the world was truly ready for the truth she had uncovered. But the traveler's question cut through her doubts. "Are you afraid of the consequences?" the traveler asked, sensing her hesitation. "Fear is the weapon of those who seek to control. Do not let it stop you. Your path is already chosen. You have been entrusted with a mission, and now you must step forward with courage." Miriam knew that the traveler's words were true. She could not hide from the truth any longer. She had to share it, no matter the cost. But as the fire crackled and the night grew darker, Miriam understood that the world she was about to enter would not be an easy one. It was a world filled with those who clung to the old ways, to the institutions that thrived on division and control. But it was also a world that longed for healing, for peace, for a new way of living. The traveler looked into her eyes, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire universe was reflected in his gaze. "The path is long, Miriam," he said softly, "but remember, your heart will always guide you. Trust in the divine within you, and you will never be lost." With that, the traveler disappeared into the night, leaving Miriam with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. She knew now that her journey was not just about uncovering hidden teachings, it was about living them, embodying them, and sharing them with the world. Miriam awoke the following morning to the soft glow of dawn, a warmth that seemed to embrace her with newfound clarity. The night's encounter with the mysterious traveler had lingered in her mind, as if it had unlocked something deep within her heart. She could still feel the power of his words, "Trust in the divine within you, and you will never be lost." For the first time in her life, Miriam felt certain of her purpose, a certainty that transcended doubt and fear. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she no longer felt alone. With the manuscript in her hands and the teachings embedded in her soul, Miriam packed her belongings, knowing that her time in the village was coming to an end. The road that lay ahead was unknown, and though she had learned to trust in her inner guidance, she knew that she would face resistance. The world was not ready for these truths that could shatter the foundations of the very institutions that had governed society for centuries. But Miriam was not afraid. As she traveled from one town to the next, sharing the teachings of Christ as she had uncovered them, she encountered people who were open, eager to listen. They, too, were seeking something deeper. They, too, felt the emptiness of a world built on illusion and separation. The words that had once felt like an impossible burden now seemed like a gift, a message that resonated deeply within the hearts of those who heard it. Yet, there were also those who rejected her message outright. Priests, scholars, and leaders of religious institutions dismissed her as a heretic, a fool who dared to question the sacred doctrines that had been established for centuries. They feared the disruption her teachings could cause, for they understood the power of the truth she carried. To embrace the divine within, to transcend the need for external authority, would undo the power they held over others. In every village, there was a battle, a spiritual battle, not of swords, but of ideologies. Miriam encountered resistance at every turn, but with each confrontation, she grew stronger, her understanding of the teachings deepened, and she began to embody them more fully. When the world around her tried to silence her, she would retreat into stillness and listen to the voice within, the divine spark that had always been there. She realized that this was the essence of what Christ had taught, the power of love, the power of silence, the power of knowing that all beings were interconnected. Miriam no longer sought to convert or convince others. She simply lived the teachings, embodied them, and let her life become the testimony to their truth. In this, she found peace. Over time, Miriam became a beacon of light for those who were lost, those who were tired of the endless pursuit of power and wealth. She was not a preacher, nor a leader in the traditional sense. She was a guide, a way shower, just as Christ had been. Her life was a living testament to the truth she had uncovered, truths that lay beyond the boundaries of religion and tradition. And as Miriam's journey continued, she began to see the fruits of her labor. People who had once felt isolated, disconnected, now came together in communities of love and compassion. They didn't need to build massive churches or temples to find God, they simply needed to look within. And through this inner awakening, the world slowly began to change. It was not a dramatic shift. The institutions that had long controlled the masses did not fall overnight. But there was a subtle transformation taking place. People were beginning to realize that the true power did not lie in external symbols or rituals, it lay in the heart. In the quiet stillness that connected every soul to the divine, the more people embraced this inner truth, the less power the old systems held over them. Miriam's mission was never about overthrowing governments or religions. It was about awakening the divine within each individual, helping people to see that they were not separate from God, but that God resided in them and in everything around them. In this realization, the world would heal, not through force or control, but through love, unity, and inner peace. Years passed, and Miriam's name became known far and wide, not for the miracles she performed, but for the simple, profound truth she embodied. She did not seek fame or recognition. Her only desire was to help others see the light within themselves. And in that, she had found her calling. One evening, as she sat by a fire in yet another village, surrounded by those who had come to hear her speak, Miriam reflected on the long road that had brought her here. She had been guided by the teachings of Christ, teachings that had been hidden, misunderstood, and lost for centuries, but she had uncovered them. And in doing so, she had come to understand that the most powerful message was not one of dogma, but one of love, self-awareness, and inner peace. Miriam looked up at the night sky, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The stars above seemed to whisper their approval, as if the universe itself was affirming the path she had chosen. She smiled, knowing that her journey was far from over. The world was vast, and there were still many hearts to awaken. But in that moment, Miriam knew that the truth she had uncovered was eternal. It had always been there, hidden within every person, waiting to be remembered, and as long as she lived, she would continue to share it, knowing that the divine spark within her was the same as the divine spark within every other soul. For Miriam, this was the ultimate lesson, the greatest teaching of all, that the power to transform the world, to heal, to love, to be free, was not in the hands of any institution or leader. It was in the heart of each individual, waiting to be awakened. And as she sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows across her face, Miriam realized that the journey of awakening was never truly complete. It was a never-ending path, one that would continue through every moment of her life, guiding her, sustaining her, and leading her back to the source of all creation.